hours. Let's bring in John McTernan. John is a political strategist and commentator and a former political advisor to Tony Blair. John, does that put you in the Labour camp then?
Yes, it does, always.
OK, well, let's get that one clear and out in the open. What do you make of what the predictions are that Reform is going to do well?
I think in a way it's not a surprise. Since the last general election in July last year, Reform have been rivaling the Tory party on the right and the Labour Party on the centre-left for popularity. Those three parties, Reform, Labour and the Tory party, have been broadly on 25% in the polls for the last 9 months, 10 months. So yeah, Reform are on the rise. They're a real political party, and their leader, Nigel Farage, is seen, I think seen correctly by voters, as one of the most charismatic figures in British politics. And that's really what's drawing the support towards them, I think.
There is a by-election happening at Runcorn and Helsby up in the northwest of England. It's not that far from where I grew up, so I know the area quite well. I've got family there. Farage has visited the constituency many times. He's one of these people who likes to press the flesh, to use that phrase, put himself in the face of people and try to sort of use that charisma. Is that something you think that could end up carrying that constituency for Reform, or can Labour fight back and hold it?
Yeah, look, I think one thing about Nigel Farage is he's very comfortable in his own skin. He's very, very jolly. He's very friendly. He's the kind of politician you go, well, I wouldn't mind having a drink with him, wouldn't mind having a pint with him, wouldn't mind having a glass of wine with him, because you just know there'll be the bonhomie and the generous character will lead to decent company and a good conversation. And I think that goes a long way in modern politics, because modern politics is so technocratic, so technical, and often so dour. It's always about bad things happening. Whether it's the trade wars that are erupting coming out of the US, whether it is climate crisis, whether it is the inflation, the pandemic we went through. A lot of things are very dour and downbeat in politics, and Nigel Farage doesn't have that. He represents change. That's what one of the voters in your package said. He represents change. His party is called Reform because it's reflecting a fact that people in Britain do want change. They voted for it last year with the new government, the Labour government, and they've not seen that change manifest yet through the record of the current government.
Reform has 4 MPs. Farage stood many times to be an MP and only succeeded on the last election in July, so 4 MPs. They could make it 5 if they win Runcorn and Helsby, of course. Labour has a massive majority of over 400 MPs in the House of Commons, so this isn't going to change Labour's actual ability to govern at this point. But you mentioned about Farage being this jolly character. Behind that, though, there are some very distasteful things, given his politics comes from, well, the far right wing.
Look, one thing that Nigel Farage has been very clear about is he is leading a modern right-wing party, not a far-right party. The far-right in Britain, Tommy Robinson, who's in jail because of breaking the law, Tommy Robinson tried to give support to Nigel Farage and his Reform Party, and Nigel Farage rejected it. He said there are extremists on the far right who don't have a legitimate role in British politics. Farage has got his 4 seats in Parliament. He's pursued a number of causes in politics. The longest one was not just his running for Parliament, but actually, Britain, Brexit, Britain leaving the European Union. He's probably the most consequential politician of the last half century in the UK, along with probably Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair. And extraordinary for a man who wasn't actually in Parliament to achieve such a huge public policy change, such a huge change in direction. So people in the Labour Party campaigning do try to throw accusations against Nigel Farage. He has to be beaten as the politician he is, not with attempting to create some fear about him for policies he doesn't stand for. Yes, he's on the right, and yes, he's beating the Tory party on the right, and create a block of 25% of the vote, which, taken together with the Tories, 20 to 25% of the vote, is a majority of the country. So he's led a movement and has to be taken seriously from that point of view.
Indeed, for people who don't know, you could probably say that Farage was extremely influential in Brexit happening. Clearly, his UK Independence Party, the one before this current one, campaigned on that sole premise. And when Brexit happened, he just left the party. That was that. He's tapped into a sense which I think is going on in many countries, including France. The people are fed up with how things have been done and they want things to change. They feel they've been left behind and they think that the people who are saying what they want to hear can actually provide that. I suppose the proof's always going to be in the pudding. If Farage were to ever get into power, as supporters are saying he will one day be Prime Minister, that might be the thing that he'll find the most difficult.
Oh, look, power is the most difficult thing for politicians because instead of making the claims you might make as an opposition politician that things could be better, you have to actually practically make them change and make them better. And that is the most difficult test for any politician. How do you make the changes that you claim are so easy and that the current government that you're opposing doesn't make so well? And I think that Nigel Farage has one limitation, among others, but a kind of fundamental one, which is the force, the electoral force, the discontent, the tide that he's surfing, that discontent is really a discontent with the current modern settlement of capitalism, the neoliberal capitalism we've been living in for decades. That's been rejected by the British people in Brexit. It's been rejected by the British people when they threw out Boris Johnson at the last election. But I don't think that many of the far-right parties that are across Europe actually are articulating, and Nigel Farage definitely isn't, that they want to replace this form of neoliberal capitalism with a different form. I think when you look in detail at what people are saying, they want a kind of social democracy to return, the kind of settlement that was in most countries between the mid-1950s and the mid-1970s. Now, that was a good time for most workers, most families, most communities across Europe. People are nostalgic for that. Nigel Farage taps into that nostalgia, and maybe he's moving in policy terms because just recently, not all of your viewers will know this, but just recently he started to articulate a defence of nationalisation, a traditional social democratic left-wing policy. And so there's some signs he understands the space he's occupying is of what it might be a traditional social democratic voters, traditional Labour Party voters, and that's true, I think, in France and Germany too. Traditional working class communities of all sorts are trying to get a recreation of a social democratic state that they used to enjoy.
John McTernan, fascinating speaking to you, sir. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your knowledge and your analysis. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. John McTernan, political strategist, commentator and former political advisor to Tony Blair.